"We didn't order anything for your little brat," my sister threw out, pushing the bread basket toward him while her children devoured steaks costing $80. "You should have fed the freeloader at home if you were going to drag him to a restaurant," my father chimed in. I kept silent and smiled, but when the waiter returned, I stood up and did something that made my relatives shut their mouths all at once. For most of my adult life, I've been cleaning up after my sister financially, morally, and even with her children. Babysitting when she takes off to God knows where yet again. I did this without much gratitude, constantly hearing the same song from my parents. She's going through a difficult period, as if Jessica's entire life hasn't been one continuous difficult period. Drama upon drama, crisis upon crisis. But somehow, miraculously, she always lands on her feet because someone is eternally laying down straw beneath her. Usually me and her parents. They fuss over her like she's made of glass, as if she's a priceless antique and not a 40-year-old woman with 2 children. And I, by the way, am reliable Linda, the workhorse who isn't entitled to a break according to her status. So when I offered to pay for dinner in honor of our parents' 40th wedding anniversary, an evening that I naively hoped would pass without drama, it was supposed to be special. I booked the best restaurant in Portland on the waterfront with a view of the Willamette River. I reserved a private dining room in my name and planned to surprise them with a restored wedding photograph in a custom frame. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. I just wanted to spend the evening like normal people, sit together, eat, and at least pretend to be a normal family. Instead, I got steamrolled by family indifference. We arrived 5 minutes early. When we entered, my son Michael was holding my hand, excited in his quiet, shy manner. The whole way he asked if he could order dessert. I said he could have anything his heart desired. Inside, Jessica was already sitting with her family. Brad had a glass of bourbon in his hand. Their boys were loudly playing some game on their iPads. Sound at full volume, naturally. Jessica didn't even stand up, just turned over her shoulder and tossed out, "Oh, you showed up." Mom absently kissed me on the cheek. Dad remained seated, barely acknowledging us with a glance. No one asked how Michael was doing. No one even looked at the gift bag in my hands. We sat down. I helped Michael unfold his napkin and began studying the menu with him. He pointed his finger at chicken tenders and smiled. I was about to call the waiter when Jessica leaned over, pushed the bread basket toward Michael, and delivered, "We didn't order anything for your little brat." She said it as if it were the natural order of things. I blinked, thinking maybe I misheard, but then my father intervened as if it were self-evident. "You should have fed your freeloader at home if you're bringing him to a restaurant." That was the moment of truth. Not just the words, but that condescending tone. How Michael wilted, slightly. Mom's silence. She didn't even raise her eyes from her glass of water. Jessica's self-satisfied smirk, as if she'd won some perverted game of hers. I sat there for several seconds and realized what I probably should have understood many years ago. They weren't going to change, but I could. I called over the waiter. When he approached, I stood up and said, "Please cancel all orders that haven't gone to the kitchen yet. And everything that's already being prepared, put on my father's tab. After all, it's his anniversary today." You could have heard a pin drop. Then I looked at the waiter again and added, "And my son is ordering the Wagyu ribeye steak, medium rare, with truffle mac and cheese and a Coke. And quickly, please." Brad started coughing, apparently choking on his bourbon. Jessica looked at me as if I'd grown a second head. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Uncle Greg, Mom's brother, let out one short laugh, low and approving. Aunt Karen, his wife, didn't even try to hide her smile. The waiter nodded and left. I sat down as if nothing had happened and handed Michael a breadstick. He was still silent, but I could see he understood that I had stood up for him. Dinner continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Jessica's boys whined that their orders were delayed. Brad whispered something in her ear. My parents kept exchanging glances, as if trying to decide whether they should say something. I didn't care anymore. The bill came. My father looked at it as if he'd been personally insulted. He didn't say thank you, didn't even glance in my direction. When we got up to leave, I gave the waiter the framed wedding photograph and asked him to place it on the table after we left. I took Michael's hand. On the way out, I accidentally bumped into a dessert cart. A plate crashed. I didn't apologize. That night my phone exploded. Calls, messages, voice memos on every platform. All angry. Jessica asking what was wrong with me. Dad demanding I reimburse him for the money. Mom texting that I'd disgraced them, that it was shameful to show their faces in public. I ignored everything until the next day. When they texted that they were coming over, they had no idea what awaited them. They didn't even warn me, just rolled up to my house and came to the door. Parents and Jessica. Brad's absence was suspicious. He probably acted wisely. He always seems to disappear when serious conversation is in the air. Michael saw them through the window before I did. Didn't say anything, just looked at me with that tired expression I was beginning to recognize in myself. I didn't panic, didn't rush to tidy up or smooth things over. I just picked up my phone and called Uncle Greg. "They're here," I said. "We'll be there in 10 minutes, he replied. No questions, no drama. As always, I opened the door before they could ring. Mom entered first, like she owned the place. Jessica followed her, arms crossed over her chest, all offended. Dad came in last, holding some official envelope, as if he was about to serve me a lawsuit. No one greeted us. No one looked at Michael, who was sitting on the couch pretending to play on his Nintendo Switch, but actually listening to every word. Jessica opened her mouth as soon as everyone was inside. "You disgraced the whole family yesterday." She said this as if it were an undeniable fact, as if I had violated some sacred law by refusing to allow my son to be treated like a charity case. I said nothing. Mom intervened. "You made a scene, showed disrespect to your father. We've never been so humiliated in front of people." It was laughable. These same people who once made a scene at Olive Garden over an expired coupon. But of course the family disgrace is me. Dad put the envelope on the table and tapped it with his finger. "This is the bill for the private dining room. $7,000. The contract was in your name. Since you refused your obligations, pay up." It was complete insanity. I didn't touch the envelope, just said, "Wait here," and left. 2 minutes later, the side door opened and Uncle Greg and Aunt Karen entered. They didn't care about formalities either. They knew why they'd come. The smile slid off Mom's face as soon as she saw them. Jessica muttered something under her breath. Dad looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. I came back and stood opposite them. "I've decided I'm no longer sponsoring Jessica," I said. "No apologies, no excuses. Just the truth. She's not my child. I'm not her safety net. I pay half her rent most of the year. That ends today. If she and Brad want to stay in their apartment, let Brad take on his share of responsibility. Or let them downsize." Jessica started raising her voice, but I didn't even look at her. Mom turned to Uncle Greg, saying it wasn't his business to interfere in family matters. Aunt Karen intervened before he could answer. She didn't shout, didn't even raise her voice. Calmly listed everything I'd done for Jessica all these years. Money, free babysitting, emotional support. And then asked one simple question. "When was the last time any of you helped Linda?" No one answered. Finally, I took the envelope, opened it, and scanned the bill. Exactly $7,000. The reservation was indeed in my name. "Here's what I'll do," I said. "I'll give you $3,500. Not out of obligation, but out of pure pettiness. Just so I can sleep peacefully knowing you didn't get everything." Dad slammed his fist on the table. Mom's face twisted with a mixture of hurt and rage. Jessica looked like she was ready to lunge at me. "Leave," he said. They didn't move, so I walked to the door and opened it. Stood there silently. Uncle Greg stood up too. That was enough. They left, muttering under their breath and slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I didn't say a word, just locked the door behind them and stood there. It wasn't relief, it wasn't joy. There was only silence, a clean break. I thought that was the end, but the real chaos was just beginning. It all started with phone harassment. First Mom, then Jessica, then Dad. WhatsApp voice messages, texts, Facebook messages. All varying degrees of toxic, from tearful manipulation to outright abuse. I ignored it all. 2 days of complete silence on my part. I didn't respond, didn't explain, didn't apologize. That's when the real campaign began. Jessica posted a vague but pointed status on Facebook. Something about how some people forget where they came from when they get a little success. Wrote that she was grateful to her parents who taught her humility and love. Reactions poured in. Shares multiplied. Several mutual friends sent private messages. Linda, what's going on? I kept silent. Then someone called CPS. A week later, a call from Lincoln Elementary. Ms. Anderson, we received a call about your son's welfare. Anonymous, of course. I knew exactly whose work it was. They were willing to do anything to hurt me. The school counselor met with Michael. Verdict: the boy is well-adjusted, polite, academically strong. No red flags. I explained that we had family tension, and the counselor nodded sympathetically. Apparently not the first time she'd heard such things. Then Mom created a family group chat, added all the relatives, wrote a tearful message that she was heartbroken because one daughter had abandoned the family. Didn't name names, but everyone understood anyway. Uncle Greg replied briefly, "Stop the drama. Everyone knows what really happened." Jessica left the chat after 10 minutes, and then a call from Brad. Number not even saved. I declined it. He sent a text saying he was staying neutral but hoped we wouldn't involve the kids, as if I were starting a war. I blocked him. And 10 days after that dinner, Dad showed up at my workplace. Stood near the parking lot with a stone face. When I came out during my lunch break, he shoved a photo into my hands. From that very dinner, someone had captured the moment. I'm standing. Michael is looking up at me gratefully and relatives in the background. Some shocked, some stunned. Dad had circled himself with a red marker. This is who you made a fool of. I didn't even take the photo. Said leave. He turned around and left. That night, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and finally allowed myself to feel everything. Not sadness, anger. These people are supposed to be my family. This is their response to me protecting my own child. I could have cut them off completely right then. But I didn't. I decided to give one last chance. Wrote 2 letters by hand to my parents and to Jessica. Sent them certified mail. Wrote directly, I want peace, but not at the cost of my dignity. I'm ready for dialogue, but only honest and respectful, without manipulation and guilt trips. Silence. A week passed, and then I saw a new post on Mom's Facebook. A photo. Her, Jessica, and the nephews in an embrace. Caption: family is everything. Sad that not everyone values it. That's it. Enough. I didn't get angry looking at their smiling faces. I felt emptiness, as if I were looking at strangers playing at being a family that never existed. And the caption was the final straw. No emotions, no drama. Let the facts speak for themselves. I contacted Jessica's landlord, asked for a payment history. The property manager sent everything within an hour. 7 months, I'd covered half the rent. Total, $14,000 at $2,000 per month. I printed the bank statements, highlighted my transfers, made copies. Sent it to Jessica by certified mail. No comments, let the number speak. Half an hour later, a screenshot from her bank app. Balance, $34. And 4 words, go ahead and sue. I didn't respond. I went to a private Facebook group for local moms. Usually they discuss schools and activities. Created an anonymous post. Would you forgive a sister who lived off you for months, lied about it, and then trashed you publicly when you tried to set boundaries? Comments flooded in. Most were supportive and outraged. Many shared similar stories. One wrote, "My sister did the exact same thing, still dealing with the fallout." But the most interesting thing happened that evening. A stranger sent me a private message. Turned out she had worked with Jessica at a marketing firm in Seattle. Told how Jessica threw a colleague under the bus. Filed a false HR complaint after a minor disagreement. The woman was let go 3 months later. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen the photo. A company holiday party at a winery. Jessica with a glass of wine in an expensive dress. The date, those very weekends when she was crying to me about being broke and Brad being out of town for work. I had Venmo'd her $500 that week. I saved everything, but didn't respond. The next day, cleaning out the garage, I stumbled upon a box from my childhood. Photo albums, old cards, and at the bottom a letter in an envelope. Mom's handwriting, addressed to Grandma. 22 years ago, a week after Jessica's birth. I shouldn't have read it. At first, typical complaints about postpartum exhaustion. But then it got harsh. She wrote that she didn't want a second child. One was enough. Called me an accident. And the devastating line, "I don't feel anything for this child. It's like I'm just going through the motions of being a mother. I don't even have the energy to try." About me, in her own handwriting. I sat there for an hour on the garage floor among old boxes. Everything made sense. Why I always had to beg for attention. Why I was always overshadowed by Jessica's dramas. Why I always pretended everything was fine. That evening, after putting Michael to bed, I sat at my computer and composed an email. Just facts. Listed the amounts, attached screenshots of our text conversations, documented Jessica's lies, and at the end, a photo of that paragraph from Mom's letter. I don't feel anything for this child. It's like I'm just going through the motions of being a mother. I don't even have the energy to try. Sent it with no subject line, no signature. Then the great purge. All phone numbers blocked, all social media connections severed, all email addresses filtered to spam. Not out of revenge for peace. But peace wasn't enough for them. 2 days later, they escalated. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. I had just finished a Zoom call and was folding Michael's laundry. Thought it was an Amazon delivery or a neighbor. I didn't expect to see 2 official-looking people with badges. One introduced herself, Child Protective Services. I froze for a second, thinking they had the wrong house, but no, they said my name. Someone, anonymously of course, had reported that I frequently left Michael alone, that he seemed withdrawn and possibly neglected. I can't describe that feeling, like ice water in my veins, but I didn't panic. I invited them in. They were professional, didn't accuse me immediately. Looked around, checked the refrigerator, looked for signs of neglect, asked questions. That same day, they contacted the school. Result, complaint unfounded. Michael's room is clean, filled with books and art supplies. Teachers raved about him. The boy is well-mannered, excels academically, helps other students. The refrigerator is fully stocked. He has a consistent routine. And yet, such an investigation doesn't just disappear, it goes into a file. Now, there's a CPS case number. The principal, though sympathetic, warned me, it's just documentation. But if there's another report, it triggers a more intensive investigation automatically. That's when I realized this wasn't just family drama anymore. This was warfare. I went home and sat in silence for an hour, thinking. Then I called Uncle Greg, told him everything. The visit, the questions, how the caseworker apologized as she left, clearly recognizing this was malicious. He didn't react the way I expected. Didn't explode, just said, "That was a warning shot. Linda, prepare yourself." I prepared. Pulled out all the documentation, rent receipts, Venmo transfers, photos from that winery party where Jessica was living it up during her supposed crisis. Printed everything, organized it into binders, even found old text messages where she thanked me for saving her life. And then, going through old files, I found something I'd forgotten. A birthday card from Jessica for Michael's second birthday. Written inside, "Thank you for being so dependable. I'd be lost without you." Verbatim. That went into the binder too. Next step, formal cease and desist letters. My attorney worked quickly. She specialized in family harassment cases where relatives weaponize false reports. We sent certified letters to Jessica, Mom, and Dad. Each one clearly stated harassment, online defamation, false CPS report, unpaid debts. Everything documented. One more action of this nature, and we file criminal charges for filing a false report and a civil suit for defamation. And then something unexpected. Brad texted. I'd forgotten to block him. He sent a Venmo notification. $7,000. Exactly half of what I'd paid toward their rent. No message, no apology, just the payment. A few minutes later, another text. I told her to stop. I moved out. Do whatever you need to do. I stared at my phone for a long time. Brad had always been weak and was now abandoning ship. Aunt Karen called 2 days later. She'd run into my mother at Trader Joe's. Said Mom looked terrible, clearly hadn't slept in days. Was muttering to herself in the produce section about how I was tearing the family apart. But Aunt Karen didn't let it slide. Told her directly, Linda isn't tearing anything apart. She just stopped letting you use her. More messages started coming. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. Turns out Jessica had borrowed $1,500 from her 6 months ago. Promised to pay it back in a week, then blocked her number. Saw my name in some comments online and put 2 and 2 together. Another relative told how she'd driven 2 hours to rescue Jessica after a fight with Brad. Never even got a thank you. The more distance I created, the more stories emerged. I wasn't the only one they'd exploited, just the first one to say, no more. But it still wasn't over. I thought I was finally free, until 2 weeks later a certified letter arrived. Not from Jessica, not from my parents, from their attorney. And in it one sentence that made my blood run cold. Petition for grandparent visitation rights. They were taking me to court for access to my son. The envelope was thin, but felt heavy. Heavier than any insult, any manipulation. Inside, 1 page from my parents' lawyer. They were filing in Multnomah County Circuit Court for court-ordered grandparent visitation. They claimed I was maliciously denying them access to Michael, harming his development by unreasonably cutting off loving family members. They had the audacity to argue that contact with them was in the child's best interest. That's when I stopped being angry. I became strategic. I immediately called my attorney. She read it, paused, and said firmly, under Oregon law, they have an uphill battle. But this isn't about winning. It's about exhausting you. They'll drag this out, cost you time and money. And then it hit me. They don't care about Michael. They ignored him at dinner. Said I should have fed him at home. Shoved bread at him while their other grandchildren ordered expensive entrees. This is about control. A reminder that no matter how much distance I create, they can still reach me. I decided to end it. First, a comprehensive response through my attorney. Not just denying their petition, attaching evidence. Screenshots, texts, photos. The CPS report stamped unfounded. Everything. I filed a formal notice with Michael's school. No information about my son to be released to anyone, including grandparents, without my written authorization. No pickup, no attendance at school events. Nothing without my explicit permission. Next, security. Changed all my locks. Updated my emergency contacts. Revised my will with my attorney. Aunt Karen and Uncle Greg are now designated guardians if anything happens to me. Gave them access to all important documents and accounts. And one final thing. I consulted with a tech-savvy friend about tracing the CPS complaint. She couldn't confirm definitively but said, the call came from a Portland area code. Same prefix as your parents' neighborhood. Jessica. They tried to destroy me through CPS. It failed. Now, through the courts. But I wasn't going to lose. The day before filing our response, I wrote one final letter. Not email, actual paper. Sent it certified mail to my parents and Jessica. This is the last communication you will receive from me. I gave you decades of chances. I helped, protected, stayed silent, played the part. You responded with betrayal, lies, and now legal action involving my child. You are no longer my family. Any further attempts to contact me or Michael will result in a restraining order. If you appear at my home, I will call the police. If you interfere in our lives again, I will make everything public. We are done. Then the final purge. Every number permanently blocked. Every email permanently filtered. Every mutual contact removed. Not out of anger, out of survival. I thought I'd feel empty, that I'd grieve. But no. The following weekend, I took Michael to the coast. Just the two of us. No phones, no stress, just ocean, sand, and peace. He was building a sandcastle, looked up at me, and smiled. "Mom, you seem happier." And it was true. We were finally safe, finally free. And whatever came next, one thing I knew for certain, we'd be okay.